KoitCast.
Today's guest is a best-selling author, remote viewer, and researcher from Boulder in Colorado. He has a PhD in sociology and studies crop circles, cryptids, UFOs, and even runs courses to teach remote viewing. Please give a massive Koit welcome to Simeon Hein. Hi Simeon, and welcome to KoitCast.
Thank you, Koit. Thanks for having me here today.
No worries. It's an absolute honour and pleasure for me to have you here, so thank you for coming.
Sure.
Let's start with the old classics. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? All that good stuff.
Well, let's see. It was a dark and stormy night somewhere in Manhattan. My parents, they had nothing to do, so they decided to go to bed. And 9 months later, I showed up in 1963. So, no, my background is in sociology. I used to teach statistics at WSU, Pullman, Washington. So before I got involved with the topics that, we're interested in to talk about tonight, I was sort of a typical academic teacher, specializing in research methods, stats, and so forth. Now, having said that, I did have a UFO sighting with my mom in the Everglades when I was 12 or 13. Which I think had a lasting impact on me. That would have been the early 70s for you younger folk. And yeah, so way back then, 70s, when rock and roll music was like really good,
The good stuff. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think Zeppelin had just released Zoso 4, with Stairway to Heaven on it, that album, right? So that's the time frame we're looking at. And we were out looking at birds. She was a bird watcher. We both had binoculars. We lived in New York, but she had taken us down, me and her, not my brother or dad. And we were looking, and I looked up, and there was something that I couldn't tell what I was looking at. It was perfectly circular, green, and to my mind looked like a huge moon, full moon. So I said, Mom, look at that weird moon. So I see the moon was on the horizon. So she kept looking over there. I said, oh, sure, kid, And I said, no, Mom, up there. And we looked, and she goes, Sim, it's a UFO, And when we put our binoculars on it, and I remember drawing a picture of it, which I haven't been able to find, but she encouraged me to draw what I'd seen. So I remember the picture and the object. It had structure in it. It had a structure of dots that formed sort of maybe like a Z.
Oh, wow.
In an amorphous green cloud. Very strange.
A glowy cloud?
So it looks...
Was it glowy or
cloud
matte?
Was glowing and green, and it had solid structure, linear structure inside, and then it moved very quickly into a cloud from like stationary, and it's moved. It's like, what was that? And I just still remember the feeling of it, like something that just didn't belong in my sky. It didn't fit. It just didn't fit anything I knew about as a 12-year-old or 13-year-old.
It is a question for you then. How long did that sit in your head when you were that young seeing it? Did you talk about it for a day, a week, or did it?
Oh no, we talked about it for a long time.
Oh, good.
There weren't many places to talk about it. I mean, you didn't really talk about it at school that much, but Mom would bring it up, and you kind of were left amidst your high school education, junior high, senior high, you hear everything about the world and history and science and biology and chemistry and English and math and all that good stuff. But no one ever didn't match what I had seen. And one more thing, we went to the Ranger talk shortly thereafter, and all the lights were out. There was a blackout. And the Ranger asked, did anyone see anything interesting today? So my mom raised her hand, and the people we sat next to, we said, we just saw a UFO. My mom said that to them. She goes, oh yeah, we saw it too. We saw this thing spinning out of a cloud. That's what this guy said. And so they'd seen it come out of the cloud. We saw it go back in. And then the Ranger said, anyone see anything interesting? And my mom said, we saw a UFO. And she goes, oh, did anyone else see anything interesting today? Like, she didn't even want to hear it. And even my mom went up afterwards and she just brushed it off. And said, oh, they're blackouts all the time. Didn't want to hear it. So that was part two. I could see some that the person in charge didn't want to. I was really curious what we had seen, and she didn't want to talk about it. So that's when I'm a teenager, and then I go through graduate, college, graduate school. No one ever mentioned any of these topics. I did read John Keel's The Mothman Prophecies as a teenager. Somehow that showed up. I don't know if it was in the library or how I ended up with John Keel, but that book made an impression on me. And then Timothy Good's book, Above Top Secret, at the University of Arizona Sociology Department. They had a great bookstore at University of Arizona, Tucson. Somewhere how that was on the shelf at the bookstore. Perhaps there had been astronomers there at the University of Arizona. Who knows? But there was Timothy Good's book. I guess people say the book that started it all, at least for a lot of people,
Yeah. So
researchers in
that
my field.
sighting of yours, I'm very highly interested in nudges in life that sends people down a different path, and that's obviously a clear one for you because it's sat in your mind all this time, and then you're open to that side of things from the
Yeah.
academic.
Yeah.
That is amazing, isn't it? It sits, these small things sit with people. So do you think, looking back on it, that object was there for you and other people that saw it, or was it just going about its business and then you happened to see it?
No, there was something that happened there because my mom always felt like she said that's when they zapped you. She always just said this. She even said it to me a couple recently when I saw her. Uh, it was like it was an intense looking thing. It had a vibe to it that was extremely intense, and yeah, I think it created a big question in my mind that lasted for decades.
Hmm.
What was that? I thought maybe it could have been an exploded rocket from Cape Canaveral. Maybe they blew it up in my mind at the time, thinking, oh, Cape
Yeah.
Canaveral's not that. Maybe they blew something up and it's just sitting there hovering, sort of, you know. And I mean, that was like some remote possibility, but something like that's not going to go from being stationary to moving quickly in really a short amount of time. So that didn't fit. And then we had talked to the people next to us at the campfire meeting who said they had seen it too. So come emerge from a cloud. So I think it did leave this big gap in my mind, a space that needed to be filled later on in life about
Yes.
what I had seen.
Yeah. I love that because it seems very commonplace that this happens. People like yourself and other, witnesses see things early and then it opens the mind, and like exactly the phrase you said, it leaves a space and then they have to fill it. I like that
Yeah, and you know who
scenario.
this reminds me of, who we all have heard of recently, Gary Nolan.
Hmm.
He's talked about growing up in Connecticut, and on his paper route one day, he saw something hovering over the area that he couldn't explain. And that was
Yeah.
when he was just a little kid. And he also talked about some possible, contact, I think, in his bedroom at night or something like that with creatures, beings. But he mentioned that paper route. And for me, I thought, well, that's sort of like what got him going. He's a someone who's been through the university system too. He's a professor at Stanford, yet he had an experience like me in the Northeast that left him wondering. I have to mention, I grew up in an area, the Hudson Valley of New York, and at the time there were sightings allegedly in the 80s, but I think they started before that, of these huge triangular objects. And you've all
Yeah.
read and heard about the Hudson Valley UFO. And I think a new book's being written about it, I'm told, by Leslie Kean. So here's the thing. I graduated in 81, but I found out just a few years ago that there was a sighting of a big black triangular UFO by the wrestling team in 79, by our wrestling coach, Vinny. I did 2 interviews with him over the past couple of years and put it on my YouTube channel. And the interesting thing about this, Coit, is that
Hmm.
my classmates, who I know by first name to this day, never talked about it. Vinny called the police and reported it, and there were other sightings. And a friend of mine, Dominic, who I still keep in touch with from that area, found 2 newspaper articles talking about the sighting and mentioning the police and other witnesses and so forth, and reiterating what Vinny had told me in the interview about the size of the object, its position above Mamaroneck High School, and so forth. So here's a sort of as I call hidden events. This is what we call in sociology. It's something that happened in 79 in an area where other black triangles have been seen since. And yet no one talked about it in that time. I'm only finding about it now, 40 years later. So
Yeah, I think that's just a well, it's not just because that is a limiting word, but you understand it's the like sign of the times, if you will, isn't it? As times have gone on to now, more people are open and willing to discuss things versus
Right.
when in that day and age, which is a sad state of affairs, but at least it's heading in the right direction. We're not going repressive with that, with coming forward with things, you know?
Absolutely. What it really makes me wonder in the biggest possible way, speaking as a sociologist, is is the version of reality that we were taught, is it simply either too limiting or just wrong? I mean, wrong in the sense that there was a shift 500 years ago from believing we were the center of the universe, the Ptolemaic view, to the Copernican view proposed by Copernicus and validated by Galileo and others. I mean, is the version that we were taught, is it that off? And that people have had experiences like Coach Vinny all over the place, but have never talked about it. So is there going to be a great unveiling of reality that many of us experienced as kids that we
Yes.
haven't talked about? It's sort of how I feel it's going. Just from my personal experience, the more people I talk to, witnesses who've come forward to me to share their stories at conferences and people I meet, people that just call up. Uh, are there a lot of people like this who've had experiences they want to share, not just personal experiences, but I'm talking professionally in their work experience as engineers, being asked to look at strange materials and being told, the people who made this went away. Can you figure out how it works? So that end of the spectrum to my end of the spectrum of people who just saw something as teenagers, kids, Gary Nolan, who now say, look, I'm not going to be silent about this anymore. I really saw something. There were witnesses. The police knew about it. There are newspaper articles, but no one has ever explained to me what we saw that day and what could look like a big black triangle or a big hovering cloud with dots in it. What actually are we looking at?
That's the question, isn't it? What what are we looking at? Do you think anyone has the answers?
Well, I think there are people that have part of the answer.
No, I agree.
And I don't think whoever they are, they're certainly not sharing it
Mm.
very much with the public. It, I mean, I honestly don't know exactly what we're dealing with. Is it more like the Jacques Vallée idea of some other intelligence on the planet that's just sort of playing with us a little bit and
It's
changing
like
the dials by
puppeteers, yeah.
showing us some technology or something that looks extraterrestrial? Or could we go to the other end, the Elizondo Mellon view, and many others that these are literally extraterrestrial craft? Uh, the Dave Grush point of view, these are literally extraterrestrial vehicles, visitors from other solar systems or our own or galaxies. And then maybe the middle position that this is some sort of terrestrial phenomena that we're not familiar with, that's has been here with us the whole time and only shows
Yes.
itself once in a while. I think it's called the ultra terrestrial point of view. I think it could be all of the above, personally, and
Yes.
I'm not trying to cop out, but I mean, I think we have evidence from interaction of people who've encountered this phenomena and the occupants of these craft and vehicles. It seems to be a spectrum of phenomena. I think what's called overlapping phenomenology. And I think our brains don't particularly like that. We want an explanation. We want it to be something on Fox News you're going to see tonight. And they're going to say, we've got another witness for you. Like they've been talking about it for a while. This is what it is. I think it's a variety of phenomena that overlap, but we could say one thing about it. It's not ordinary reality like we were taught. This is something completely different, and it's intelligent and more intelligent than we are in many ways.
I fully agree. I've long held the position that it's overlapping phenomena. It's loads of things, and it just muddies the waters and makes it look like you don't know where to look. Do you know what I mean? But they are separate and unique phenomenon just coalescing together, and it messes with our heads. You're right. We like ones and zeros. We like the answers. We just can't get them at this moment in time, which is so frustrating. And I know you'll feel that. And as to your other point
Yeah.
about is everything wrong? again, I think it's a mixture of a number of things. I think it's a case of we were taught the wrong things, not because out of malice, but some of those people didn't know the truth, so they couldn't teach it. Secondly, then there's all the propaganda, isn't there? And then you have the shame element as well. So it's
exactly right, exactly.
Yeah, horrible soup of things.
There are disinformation campaigns. We have learned about this from Rick Doty, who now has been much more public recently. I interviewed him back in 2019 at the UFO MegaCon in Laughlin, south of Vegas, and he talked about being in these disinformation programs. He even apologized for it now that he is the person he is. But he said that's what the Air Force did at the time. They hired actors to go to witnesses' homes to pretend to be investigators, to get pieces of material if necessary, or to get photos, right? And never return them, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think you're right. The people that taught us, we shouldn't feel bad about criticizing them in a friendly way, a constructive way. They were doing what they thought was in our interest, and they told us about their view of reality. Parents, teachers, authority figures. I don't think they really knew much more to say to us. But I think everyone is going to have to sit down and come to grips with this phenomenon. Either that or keep repressing it back in your mind, because I suspect a lot of people have encountered this. It wasn't just me and Mom in the Everglades. I think a lot of people have seen this, and no one's known how to talk about it. And how to talk about it, nobody wants their reputation damaged. We all care about our reputation, our status in society. So people are very reluctant to do things that are going to diminish their status in an irreparable way. And we all know that there are threats against pilots and military personnel who report this sometimes. Nobody wants their... one more thing. I have talked to people in the military who've been in the Air Force. They told me, you don't know how easy it is to damage your prospects for promotion. It could be things you didn't even do that maybe your spouse did, even unintentionally. Traffic tickets. At your promotional hearing, whatever it's called, I mean, they can literally bring up anything about you as a reason not to promote you to a higher rank. And I don't totally think that's to blame. You want, as you go higher up, people who have responsibility in the military, you want people who are going to be reliable, who are honest, and so forth, who have good character.
Yes.
And anything that could be impute that your character can be used against you. So you're certainly not going to say you saw a UFO up there. You get what I'm saying.
I 100% get what you're saying. It's like an early form of pre-cancelling, isn't it? In today's terms.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a horrible state of affairs. But I think as time's going on, and I recently heard actually that there guidelines put in for like aviation pilots and stuff, whereas they can actually openly report them now without fear of losing their jobs.
Well, that's what the official rules are now. And we're told this has been in place for a couple of years now by the Navy, at least since the New York Times article of 2017.
Yeah.
Right. But there's a difference between the official rules and the culture of the military. And I think people have to really believe that if they come forward, this is really and truly not going to hurt your chances for promotion for someone that's been in one area focused on their life, and promotion means a lot to you, which is why you put in all the hard hours and took the risks you did, especially in the military, to have a lifelong career, or any even civil aviation, right? Same sort of thing. It's very important for those people who are full pilots. I mean, this is what you're thinking about after 20 years of showing up and flying those planes safely for decades. We all appreciate a very safe pilot when we're on the plane.
Oh, hell
right?
Yeah.
Of course. And so people are very reluctant to take risks. I mean, for myself, just speaking, I went the maverick route after getting my PhD. I did not go back into university life. And especially after getting involved in these topics, remote viewing, crop circle research, UFOs, and now cryptids and Bigfoot, I couldn't care less what the reaction is. I want to tell the truth to my audience, to my subscribers. The most important thing for me is to tell the truth, so they can make sense of their experiences. I feel that's my job. So I'm not in that position, but I certainly understand someone that is. So
well, that's the thing, isn't it? You're in a great position where you can say, right, sod it, I'm going to tell the truth no matter what. That's my guiding principle. But you've got those other people who are just family, family, family. I ain't risking anything. I've got to look out. I've got to put food on the table for my kids. And you can understand that. But it is the people like you that help drive things forward. And there's more and
Yeah,
more, though, you these days.
that
That's all.
that is a very good point because I've never had a traditional family. I mean, my family is Astro down there and friends and so forth. So maybe
Oh, yeah, doggy.
bringing up a point, and I don't mind talking about it. Maybe it's even affected my evolution as a person because I never went that route. I felt my job as a sociologist is to do sociology, and this is to talk about why people have vested interests to take the positions that they do, to
Yeah,
believe in the things that
motivations.
they exactly. So you get the idea perfectly. Yep.
I do, 100%. We're going to circle back to some of this later on because
Sure.
I've got a whole
Please.
section on that. But I want to initially I want to jump straight into remote viewing.
Yeah.
What you call, is it resonant viewing? You call it?
Well, I call it that. You could call it whatever you want.
Okay, well, let's go with
There's a
remote
lot.
viewing.
Yeah.
It's
So
easier
there
to
are a lot of
say.
names for this. So this was a big surprise. I mean, I remember hearing Ingo Swann, the father of remote viewing, talking about this. And he said this is a big mother effing of a surprise to find that this actually worked. And I have to say it's sort of the same thing. I came across this just hearing someone talk about it on the radio, Courtney Brown talking about it, who had this thing at the time called the Farsight Institute. This was in 96, right after the program was declassified. And there were people teaching it. The program was declassified. It went on for 20 years, as your listeners know. The Soviets had their own program in, I think they called it psychotronics. It had more of a weapons oriented approach, as you would expect from the Soviet government.
Mm.
The Chinese had, and the Soviets had, I think we were told, at least 20 separate independent programs in psychokinesis, RV, and so forth. The Chinese had government at the time, I think, had 5 institutes devoted to studying this. And countries with large populations can just, find people that are naturally good at this.
Yeah.
Right. So they probably had 5 times as many Ingos. Maybe we don't even know about all of their Ingos, right? Ingo Swans and Pat Prices. And uh, so our government finds out about this in the late 60s, and they're concerned about threats to ComSec, communication security. You look at these declassified documents, and listeners can, viewers can, and read. I think a very good film about this is Third Eye Spies, which goes into the history of the program. It's a more recent movie.
I've not seen that one. I'm going to write that down and have a look.
But you should see Third Eye Spies. Russell Targ helped direct it, and Lance Mungia, someone I've met a few times. I think they put together a really good movie about the history of it. And what you see is the concern that the U.S. military, I imagine the whole Five Eyes group, which would include your country and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, the English-speaking free world countries, they were really concerned that our adversaries could be learning details of classified programs, cryptologic keys for weapon systems, you can imagine. So they started their own program, and it went on for 20 years, and they had natural psychics who were hired, Ingo Swann, Pat Price, Joe McMonagle, first as test subjects and later to practice and create protocols, at least in Ingo's case.
Yeah. Shall we define what remote viewing is? So if anyone who isn't familiar watching this or listening to this, they can understand it.
It is the ability for you to pick up non-local, distant, hidden information without using your physical senses. And I mean, this is my book about it, Opening Minds, which is about RV and also crop circles and resonance in general. And it's this ability that we have to do this. Now, I didn't think quite that the average person like myself could do this. I mean, I had seen natural psychics on TV, or there was a show in the US that psychics that would work with the police. There were 3 women. I forget the name of the show. And they would help solve cases, and they were quite good. I later met one of these women, Bevy Yeagers, at one of the IRVA conferences, International Remote Viewing Association. And it was quite fun to take some seminars with her and learn her method, which she called psychometry, which she learned from a Russian system because she went over to Russia, Soviet Union with Ingo Swann in the 70s, while the Cold War was still going on, and learned about psychometry. That is touching objects, and getting
Yeah, and getting
information.
impressions.
Exactly. And she was quite
Yeah.
good at this. And she ran her own US Psi Squad out of St. Louis. Well, anyway, there were people that learned this along the way, and people that worked in these classified programs. The Stanford program at SRI was a classified special access program, and Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ ran it. Anyway, they created this protocol called CRV, and Ingo believed this was teachable, and I learned it at the Farsight Institute at 96, a year after it's declassified. People like Ed Dames and others who had worked in the program started teaching it. It was okay to teach. The protocols had never been classified anyway. And it was very surprising that you could put a picture in a folder, and you wouldn't show the viewer ahead of time what the picture was. You just write coordinates on it. That's why it's called coordinate remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
And there you could describe it before you were shown the picture with this protocol, like opening the aperture up, like first just describing subtle impressions, man-made, natural, just basic stuff. Then colors, texture, senses to shapes. It's sort of like it opens up and you get more and more information. You don't know exactly what you're looking at for the most part, but you're getting impressions and you can write it down. And that's
Okay.
what the protocol that I learned was. Now, everyone, it's built into us. It's not like the protocol is RV, your RV, but there's a way to write it down so you don't forget it and edit anything up.
Well, this was going to be one of my questions to you, which is who can do this? And you're suggesting that everyone has the innate ability to do it. We just need to be taught the skills.
Everyone has the innate ability. We need to remember how to do it because it's
Ooh.
something that's drilled out of us by our modern educational systems. Because it's describing very quick, fleeting impressions that come across your perception, be they visual or otherwise. And you're writing them down before you forget them because the RV signal is very subtle and faint compared to your conscious mind. So it's relearning how to pay attention to very subtle feelings. I would say, Koit, it's much more like gut feelings, but not as
Okay.
strong as a gut feeling. It's a really subtle feeling compared to a gut feeling, but that's the direction it goes in. And I think everyone who's watching this right now has had a time when they had a feeling about something that they couldn't verify, but they just knew it was true
And
about
knowing.
people. Yeah, about situations you're about to be involved with, people you're involved with in your lives, so forth.
Okay.
So that's sort of what RV is, but it's kind of focusing it a little bit more than just letting it randomly come in. And some people have precognitive dreams. Sometimes you have dreams about situations that say, what was that? And it comes true a couple days later. So I think the information is there. Ingo Swann called it the matrix. The matrix is there. It's like learning to pay attention to it. And it's kind of like an idea of an Akashic record. I think it's a little beyond that. It's not just a record. It's literally some connection to this sort of big, vast space-time network of energy and information where everything is sort of there. Normally, you're not paying attention to everything. You've got your life to live. You're focused right in front of you. That's fine. But the information is there for other events, people, time, places, if you want to access it. The big surprise to me was that it works, that it's accurate.
So if I can capture this precisely in my head, let's just say this hand here, which I'm holding up in front of my face, represents our consciousness and we're tuned into this level. Let's just say slightly below that is the RV resonance or whatever it is, and we just have to tune that connection from here to there. But it's like weaker than this. So let's just say this is 10 times more powerful than this one. And that's got everything everywhere all at once, time, space, everything on this layer, and we're tuning into it. Is that what you think it is?
Yeah, I think that's a good
Whoa.
description of it. I think that's very good. It's called below the limit, subliminal. It's
Yeah.
as you access more of space time, it gets more and more subtle. That's the paradox of it. This is why we're not viewing all the time, because you don't need to know everything. You just need to know what matters to you, and your eyes and your ears and your nose are sort of telling you what matters to you through your brain. You're not going to non-local signals if it's not necessary, but the information is there. And sometimes you get these precognitive hits. I've had a couple happen a couple times while I'm driving, where it was super accurate about a minute before. I had the sensation to slow down, pay attention with no information, just like a gut feeling coming in. And so the information is there. And it's the same sort of feeling. You know, if you start paying attention to your body right now, you could pay attention to your liver or your kidneys or your heart, but you normally don't, because the system works better if you're not messing around with those organs, unless you're doing some training, mind body training, qigong, something like that, or you for some reason need to pay attention to them for medical reasons, but you're normally not thinking about them. But everyone knows if you did focus on another part of your body, you could get sensations that are more subtle than this loud signal that is called your broadcast right now, right? Or listening to this, right? So it's kind of like that. It's a subtle feeling like that that's below the ordinary threshold of consciousness. But I mean, there's a reason it's below the ordinary threshold of consciousness. Nature has designed us to delete almost most of our sensory impressions, and it's, and Ingo Swann used to talk about this, and there was a great book called The User Illusions by this Danish science writer, Tors Nordstranders, and he went into how much we delete from our sensory impressions every second, and it's more than 99%. So there's a lot happening around us all the time, and we're not conscious of it for, survival reasons. We don't need to pay attention to everything, just the main things that matter, especially when we're operating heavy machinery. Be out there on roads, you need to pay attention on what's happening to you right now. You can't be drifting off to other sorts of thoughts too much. But we do have the subconscious and unconscious minds that handle those unconscious functions that we're not aware of. This is why you don't need to think about your heart beating. Here's a good example of something that's in between: breathing. You can consciously breathe if you choose to. If you forget about it, you don't stop breathing, do you? No. It's on autopilot. So this is how our awareness can go into the unconscious realms or move back to the conscious realms, which they do all the time, which it does all the time.
Yeah, like daydreams, that's an example, yeah.
Yeah, and so RV is like a structured daydream. It's like a daydream, but there's some structure to it. And you're focused on, your monitor may move you around a target site. They don't even have to know what the target is, but they could be asking you to describe what you're perceiving. So it's like a structured daydream. It's a good way to describe it.
I have a question for you, right? You've talked about it's a feeling. Where do the images come in? Is the image that someone sent to us coordinates, is that a feeling or is it an image? Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Yes, it's a mix. It's a mix. And I think calling it remote viewing, it's not remote and it's not viewing. Okay. I mean, the signal is here somewhere in the matrix, so you're accessing it. It's happening in your present time. So the signal is not remote any more than a radio station is remote. The signal is in the EM fields around us, and you're picking it up with your radio. So the signal is actually here, even if the emitter is remote. But then the viewing part, it's not always viewing. I would say it's mostly sensing. But you do get images sometimes, and they can be very accurate. I would say in these cases, like in these sessions, like you can see, like, look at this example. Like, it's the target is the Washington Monument. So this viewer told me he was seeing the Washington Monument, but he didn't believe it. So he walked down the reflecting pool and described the Lincoln Memorial. That's on the back side of this page.
Okay.
But he was on from about 20 seconds in. He just didn't believe himself, which often happens. So sometimes viewers do literally they see something, race car, and they get the race car. This viewer thought it was a stadium. They didn't think it was a race car, but they drew the race car and the stadium, but it was a race car and a stadium. Or like a rocket.
Yeah.
So there are times when it is highly visual, and the viewer will end up describing what they see. But there's other times when it's just impressions of shapes and sizes.
How much of it is trust, by the way? Because obviously you brought up the element there for that one chap, self-doubt. Now I know that if, let's just say you're on a quiz show as an example, normally the first thought that comes to your mind is the answer, but you doubt yourself. So where does doubt play into remote viewing?
It plays a big role. And the training is to teach you not to pay attention to the doubt.
I bet that's hard.
Not to the, yes, it's challenging. You write everything down that you get during a session, including your doubts. So
Oh, right,
once you
okay.
start this session, you have to write everything down, and it can be there's a procedure to dump noise, and it's called analytical overlay, and it's put off to the side of the page. And it's when you know you're inventing images in your mind because it's too 3D and too colorful. Um, and So there is a way to let go of the noise. And we all have, when you're doing RV, you always have lack of confidence in the results. And you sort of need to, because if you're too confident, it can lead the conscious mind to want to know what it is, in the same way that we were talking before about our teachers and authority figures being certain about reality, teaching us with it, great certainty. There are
Well,
no UFOs.
this makes a really hard thing to study, then, doesn't it? Because it seems like you have to throw away ego, you have to throw away doubt, you have to throw away almost everything about your conscious mind, and that's really difficult, I'd assume.
You don't throw it away. What you learn is that I was going to show you a session we did yesterday. Well, I will find it another time.
Okay.
I just want to show you how accurate it could be. You do have that sense of doubt, but you learn to live with it. Here is look at this picture. I think the viewer that did this will be okay. Okay, so this is this is a perfect example because I was just practicing with someone yesterday. The target is Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Yep, yep.
And you can see the dome in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the dome.
Yeah. Almost identical.
Almost identical.
Yeah.
And I was moving around the target site 100 yards this way, 100 yards east, west. You can move a viewer around the site. And we've done this target a number of times, and sometimes people get it side on with the leaning tower. And it's incredibly accurate. This viewer focused more on that dome. And she kept talking about the domes and it being like a church, kind of this brick construction and a place that people gather. They don't know what they're getting because this could be anything, not just on Earth. You could give someone a target on the moon or Mars or anywhere we've explored where there's some feedback, or even if there's no feedback, for fun to send them to some extraterrestrial civilization to see what they get. But for a verifiable target, it could be anything. And, she gets that dome. Now, what's the odds of that when the target literally could have been thousands and thousands of pictures and anything anywhere on Earth?
Mm.
So, and it looks just like that dome. So anyway, you can just see we all have that sense of doubt, but it's part of the process, and you just learn to acknowledge it and keep going.
Wow. I know I would struggle with that one because I got a 50-50 mind, right? Analytical, very academic, and then I've got I believe in lots of stuff side of things, but I find that analytical bit hard to sort of put aside. I imagine a lot of people would also.
Well,
that's all.
We don't, in the RV session, we never suppress information. We just write it down somewhere. And the data get written down in different columns than the noise. And your job as a viewer is to decide, use your conscious mind to decide, is this noise or signal? Based on the feeling. Does this feel like it could be accurate data, or does it feel like, okay, my mind just made up something about this? And I forgot what the AOLs for this viewer were yesterday. She thought she was at the Vatican, which is actually the right country.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Right. And she sort of went off in that direction a little bit. It's not totally enough. It's the right country, right culture, right language, probably the same, period of time when these structures were created and so forth. But she knew it was noise, so she let it go, and so it didn't interfere because it could have been any structure like that. She doesn't, and she ended up getting that dome and so forth. So it's partly a process of encouraging the viewer to share their information without telling them anything if it's correct or not.
It's wonderful. It's so intriguing. Now, obviously, in history, we know what it was used for. We've got obviously the spy programs to look at Russia, them looking at us, etc., etc. To nowadays, what is it used for, and who does use it?
Well, the program was officially canceled in '95 in the U.S. That doesn't mean it wasn't outsourced to other agencies, other private aerospace companies. It doesn't mean someone isn't using this in some way. I'd be surprised if it's so inexpensive and it can give you accurate information. I'd be surprised if it wasn't still being used. Um, but the way we like to use it is just as a tool to show people that they have abilities they didn't know they had. To open minds. Really,
Literally, yeah.
that's what it did for me, because it shows you there's more going on in your awareness than you're consciously aware of. You can trust your gut feelings. And there's other phenomena out there that no one told you about that are real. So it's sort of like a gateway to other phenomena. There are people I know who, they enjoy it. They'll sometimes work for people or companies to help them answer questions. There is a connection to it, to all this, this news hype we hear around AI and the uses of AI.
Okay.
Because people sort of see that as like it's a second brain, right? This is what you hear. It's like another brain that you could be tapping into. And I'm not sure if that's literally true, because we know from the brain that there's a lot that's there that's not conscious, 99.9%. When you're spacing out and you're driving your car, that is a type of intelligence, but you're not conscious of it when you space out for a few minutes while you're driving. And
Mm.
sometimes you come to and say, whoa, where am I? But you were driving safely the whole time. It's just you weren't aware of it. So we have a tendency to overvalue conscious information. And that leads people to sort of compare AI to sort of like a second brain. It's like a data center, I think, in some ways, and it can put language together in interesting ways and creative ways. But in a sense, it's like having that second brain that you didn't know you had. I'm talking about remote viewing. It
Yeah, yeah.
is like this psychic functioning that's been there the whole time. And it can open you up to these phenomena that we were talking about at the beginning of the program. So for me, I think that's one of the best uses of it. Mostly when I work with it with people, we're just teaching people that they have this ability. It's enough for me to show them that they have this, and people get excited to see, just like I was back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Wow, you can really describe something you haven't seen. So you have sensory abilities. So I think the evolution is not, you hear people say there's nothing past AI at this point. Evolution stopped. I don't believe that. Humans have a huge psychic potential, if you'd like to call it that. Whatever
I
you want
agree.
to call it. It's a scientific phenomena. And we haven't developed it much because we haven't talked about it. Now, one interesting aspect of these phenomena like UFOs is people can actually see these but forget about it very quickly, or delete it from their perceptual systems so rapidly they might not remember meeting beings from other places or seeing UFOs. But I've done enough research, especially around Bigfoot, which is something that's seen just around here, even in Boulder area, and throughout the West and the United States, and even in your country too. Uh, they literally will forget about this. They won't remember it until they're hypnotized. But they've had something happen to them because they remember something, but they don't have any details. So our brains, again, are really good deletion machines. And I feel like RV opens you up to that perceptual system whereby you're more open to your greater intelligence, and you can get answers to questions you're working on, projects. I mean, you can use it in a practical way. Maybe the information will come to you while you're in a shower or while you're dreaming at night. I mean, I've worked with people, and I developed a program on this. I'm not trying to promote it here. I call it human fusion, where you sort of use RV in your own life, on your own business, your own projects, your own interests, not to view random targets like we do just for training, but to actually get information that's useful in your own life. So I'd say the answer to that, and it's a big topic, we could talk about it for a very long time, but I think the answer is it opens you up to a broader spectrum of information and a wider range of the electromagnetic spectrum to be conscious of more information and to circumvent your narrow educational training that taught you to pay attention to linear, rational thought only, to
Yes.
pay attention to the right brain, as it's called, the creative brain, to be a more complete person. I feel that's the purpose of RV.
I like that. It's a gateway to all the extrasensory information that is out there and maybe other abilities. Now, I had this on other conversations I had with other people, which is, it was a question I asked my early guests, which is, are humans' default state, is our default state psychic, everything? And the answer is yes. And it's same as what you delivered, which is our training at an early age has just narrowed our focus into the logic side of things and forgotten all that extra
Yeah.
data. Yeah.
Yes. No, now this is not a bad thing, that focus on rational linear. It's a limiting thing. So I'm not judging it and saying society's wrong to raise us this way. We're practical people now. We have built, things we can do that people in the past couldn't do. We can
Mm.
talk like this. This is the outcome of rational people working for decades to create this type of technology that we're using right now. There are certainly advantages to this, but we have to recognize the limitations. And the limitations are, it teaches us to be kind of like bigots around perceptions that people have and to be kind of arrogant. It leads us into this point of view that what counts the most is what counts the best,
Hmm.
a kind of quantophrenia. And I know this is what I wrote my dissertation about in sociology before I ever heard about RV. Quantophrenia is believing that the only thing that's real is what you can measure. The only thing that's real is what's linear. The only thing that's real is what's rational. That's where it goes off the rails. So when we encounter phenomena like we're talking about now, these UFO, UAP phenomena, NHI, if you want to call it that, non-human
Mm-hmm.
intelligence, the drawback is we can't progress because we don't believe anything's real if it's not in Wikipedia. It's like a prejudice towards the rational. So there's a strength to rational linear thought. I use it every day, like you guys, anyone does. I used to teach stats. I love math to understand things. I used to teach it, and there's nothing wrong with that side. But we have to recognize, like Einstein or Turing, Alan Turing from your country would be,
Mm-hmm.
that there's a halting problem. The halting problem, as Turing called it, is you don't know when the computer is going to crash ahead of time. The computer doesn't know when it's going to crash or go into an infinite loop. And once you go into that infinite loop, that rational thought isn't helpful anymore because it's caught in a loop of its own assumptions and it's just circling around, and it can't. And I'm afraid we could get in that halting problem, infinite loop, if we're afraid to deal with these topics of people who've experienced what we're talking about right now. At least our Congress is having classified hearings with people like David Grush and others. I think he just was in the skiff a few days ago with one of our Congress people, Tim Burchett, who's been very vocal about this. This is what we have to do, is we have been so rationalized and so linearized. We're afraid to go outside the paradigm.
But that's exactly like a scientist who ignores the outlying data, isn't it?
Exactly. And this is what I was taught in stats. And this is what led me to believe that RV could be true. I was taught in my graduate training that it's okay to throw out outliers from your data set. That is a whole nother discussion. We could spend 2 hours talking about this because even scientists, I mean, I have had a subscription to Science Magazine for quite a while, 30 years. I read every issue just out of curiosity. And
No,
I
that's
want to see
fair
what
enough. Keep up with it. Why not? I don't blame you.
state of formal science is at. And there is a big discussion whether we might have got it wrong by focusing on this sort of Pearson Galt based statistics, the folks who, 100 years ago invented these techniques based on the idea of the normal person.
Mm.
What is the normal person and who is the
Well, yeah,
outlier?
exactly. Who knows that? Who knows the answer to that question? There is no normal person because everyone perceives things differently, don't they?
Exactly. But
Yeah.
back in Victorian England and those times, this would have been okay. And nowadays, they're taking down the statues of Pearson and Galt and a few other statisticians that created these, because it's based on the idea of normalcy. And if you go too far in that direction, you're not looking at phenomena and people and events that don't fit your preconceptions, and you're putting blinders on, and you're being judgmental at one extreme or even racist at the far extreme.
Hmm.
where you're assuming normalcy is the way it should be. Well, what's normal 500 years ago is people would have thought we were practicing witchcraft here, talking to each other from a distance.
Burn us! They'd be
It's
burning us.
and they were. Aren't we told that there were 6 or 7 women burned in Europe for accused of being witches? Is that true? 6 or 7 million women over the
6 or 7 million, did you say? Jesus.
Yes, I am told
Whoa.
this is what the number of people that were burned as witches or drowned. So
Crikey.
this is the danger of this type of thinking is it can cause us to fear the unknown. So to go back to your question about RV, it teaches us the unknown is not scary, at least in yourself. You have this blank sheet of paper. You don't know what it is until the end of the session, and it's a little scary. What am I writing? The coaching during the session is just write it down. Don't be afraid. Whatever. You don't have to, you're not. Good session is any session where you learn about yourself to take away that fear of
I like
jumping
that.
off the cliff. And then you get your target, and there is the dome. And you go, wow, how did I do that? Well, we don't know exactly how you do it. I think it has something to do with the Aharonov-Bohm effect, this sort of spooky quantum effect that was discovered in the 40s and in the 50s. Aharonov and Bohm named it, which is where information from a distance without any EM signal whatsoever can affect you and reach you from a distance with no EM signal, with what's called vector potential, scalar potential. We don't have to go into that too much, but there's principles in physics that already describe spooky action at a distance.
Yes.
Aharonov-Bohm effect is one of those. Why we don't talk about this more in high school classes or even college classes? Doesn't that sound like RV to you? Is some signal reaching you from a distance with no EM signal? Yes, it
Pretty
sounds a lot
much.
like Aharonov-Bohm to me.
Yeah.
And
Well,
even
why
how
don't they
put off.
teach you stuff? You know why? Because we can't even get the basics in schools at the moment, I think. So,
Well,
why would
this
we
is
go
why
into
we
this?
need to jump ahead. But anyway, this is sort of my long-winded answer to your question about uh, the limitations. You mentioned the drawback of our linear rational thinking. It can put people on the moon and even send up space launches, as happened last week, and they can tip over. But at least they got there, which
Yeah,
is amazing. That's
definitely.
Newtonian mechanics, incredibly powerful. It can't describe all of the universe as we know it. It can't describe RV as far as I know, and it can't describe some of these spookier quantum effects. So, the strength of any of our perception of our humanness is to recognize the power of a tool and its limitations. Fire can cook your meal, or it could burn your house down, depending how it's used, or it can create explosions. It could help you create a building site and the foundation and clear an area out. I have a friend who works in demolition, so I
No,
know a
that's
little
fair
about.
enough. I
Yeah,
think,
and it
go
can
on.
be dangerous too. It create bombs. So here's the point. I mean, a healthy modern discussion of reality has to recognize the strengths of the systems we've created and their weaknesses, or we're not being adults.
Not being thorough. Yeah, thinking things through. I completely agree. Let's go down this route, which is what's the most extraordinary thing ever seen by people in this field? What's the outliers, if you will, from remote viewing?
Well, I think the sessions that have made the most impact on me are where people literally read numbers and letters off of file folders in
Oh,
secure facilities. And I mean, this is how they got the funding, and Pat Price and Ingo. I mean, these are certain, and you'll see this in Third Eye Spies. I mean, these are the sessions that stand out, that show proof positive that it's a real phenomena, where they were asked to view an area in West Virginia that was near the Sugar Grove NSA facility. And that's the viewing mind will go to what's the most interesting in an area. It might go away. The target was someone's vacation cottage, but over the hill, a half a mile away, was this NSA facility. And that's what the viewers described. And Pat Price was able to read code names off of file folders. They all had something to do with the game of pool, rack 'em up in cue ball and 8 balls and so forth. And the intelligence community was so concerned when they were doing this on purpose to get funding. But I mean, it set off a little mini crisis, that something that's considered secure. Now, I mean, I have never been able to read a word off of a page. It's not the easiest thing to do for any viewer, but good viewers can do this. And so I would say in the history of viewing, that's one of the more spectacular sessions. And there are other ones where they, viewers, and keep in mind, these are all sessions where the government was involved. They have resources that the average person like you or me don't have. So they can verify that these are accurate sessions because they have access to satellites and other resources. But those types of sessions, the Semipalatinsk session that Pat Price viewed, where he was able to view this Soviet chemical laser facility and this huge cranes, the gantry cranes, but he was able to go in the building, describe seeing the big metal spheres. I think they're about 60 feet across or something that contain these chemical lasers, a lot of chemical reactions going on to generate the energy to create coherent light. And they didn't get the feedback for a couple of years. He passed away before they even had people to go in the building, but it was accurate. It was completely accurate. I think Russell Targ said it was accurate within to a few inches, something like this. I mean,
whoa,
that's incredible. I mean,
it is incredible.
He's describing this inside of the building, and he gets these big metal gores like orange peels, and scientists go in a couple of years later, see it. So it's sessions like that, to me, that are the most amazing. Of course, people go into the future. There's ARV studies where people predict financial markets a week or two ahead of time. And people that have done that year in, year out, it's very time consuming. But you can do it and view which object you're going to be shown, the up market object or down. You just pick two contrasting objects. And you say, I think I'm going to be shown this one. And the monitor would say, well, that's down market. We'll place a down bet. People have done that over a couple months or even years. Greg Kolodziejczyk from Canada, the distance runner, extreme athlete, wanted to see if it worked, and he did it for 13 years and got 65% hit rate.
Which is going to always be enough, isn't it, in your finances? That one, yeah.
No, he made consistent profits year in, year out. You aren't going to do 5,000 as a statistician. I'm going to tell you, you're not going to do 5,300 trials like he did, something like that, and get a 65% success rate if there's no effect. It will converge to 50-50 if you were guessing. Market up, market down. Yeah. Even the best traders on Wall Street, the people that try to predict this, if you ever watch any of those financial channels, they're happy if they get anywhere above 50%. They can say, look, I understood what was going on. And that's probably mythological because the managers that make a lot of money one year won't make it the next year. So they were probably just lucky, but I won't tell them that because this is their jobs on the line. But Greg Kolodziejczyk was able to prove you could do ARV. Hal did it in his experiments. Hal put off to raise money for a local Waldorf school. I forgot how much he made, couple $100,000.
Oh, geez.
I think it was like Russell. These are people that created it, did it with their group at Stanford, and talked to people. They were able to do it, but it can stop. That's the interesting thing, Koit. That technique can stop if the viewers get bored with it. I was told in one case, the investor that was funding the Silver Futures viewing with Targ's group, the Spook group at Stanford, he came in once. I was told by someone who worked in the group. He said, the guy came in with his fancy cars and his gold chains. He said, oh, guys, this is working so well. You're making me so much money. Can we do it twice a week instead of once a week? And I was told it never worked again. They didn't know who the investor was, and they didn't like this guy.
And no, I imagine not.
Work. It's so sensitive. Anyway, I'm talking a lot about it. Do you get the idea?
No, that's weird because that says that intention and motivation also play a part in this, which opens up new lines of thinking to say that almost this field is being controlled by something. Is it the intention?
Chaos.
I mean, well, yeah.
Sensitive chaos.
Incredible. And what's the best or strangest thing you've particularly seen or felt via this method?
There were a few times I was doing viewing where I felt like I was at the target site. And it's called bilocation.
Mm-hmm.
Where you actually feel like the room goes away and you're there. You are at the target site and you're walking around. And I know the military viewers, people like Lynn Buchanan talked about this. He viewed, I think it was a Swiss village, and he was so amazed by the session. He went there to see if it was correct. And he said it was just like in his viewing session, every street, everything.
Now, a question on that, if I may interject here. Yeah. Was he just seeing, or could he feel, say, like the wind on his body, like it was almost a bilocated body that then had senses, or was it just the viewing sense?
No, I think he felt like he was there.
Whoa.
He could draw a map. Now, this doesn't happen all the time. It's actually kind of rare. But it happens once in a while. I had it happen with this destruction of the dinosaurs event. Again, I'm not told what the target is ahead of time, but I just see these creatures in the swamp, and they've got big necks, and they're eating algae and plants. And the viewer monitor moved me forward in time, and all of a sudden it was like gray and dusty, like consistent with the idea of a meteor
Mm,
collision. Yeah, that was one target that was sort of unforgettable. You know, what stuck out in that session was the smell of the air. It had this springtime clean air that I don't think I've ever even experienced something that like that on Earth. It was a pre-pollution air.
definitely. And bear in mind, it back in those days, the plants were so big because there was oxygen was more prevalent.
Right.
So I imagine that.
That's exactly what it felt like. Highly oxygenated, pure, clean,
Mm,
gorgeous air. And I think maybe, I'm in the Rockies here, so maybe occasionally you'll be way up there at 14,000 feet or high up. And you'll get that. I'll get a little reminiscent feeling because you're pretty high up and it's springtime and pollution's far away. But anyway, those are the things. So this is by location, and other people have experienced this. So that'd be one of the things. But we viewed extraterrestrial targets too. And I think coming face to face with extraterrestrials in these sessions,
and
it
you've
leaves
done
an
that.
impression. Yeah, yeah, because you could give people UFOs to view, and you can go inside or their homelands,
Right, we
homeland.
have to hit down this avenue. So,
Okay.
first off,
Yes.
the particular alien that you saw in, let's just say one instance, pick one. What did it look like? What did it feel like? What did it smell like? All that stuff.
Well, it certainly wasn't as strong as that dinosaur target.
Okay.
Um, it's just more of these impressions you get. So I wouldn't say, in my viewing, it was very strong. Again, it's a blind target, so you don't know what you're getting. Um, but if I could think of one target, there were several. I remember going underground to Mars to view a previous Martian civilization. And
Okay.
this would have been a far side target. And I remember that the Martian characteristic reminded me of Native Americans. And other people had gotten the same perceptions at times. They didn't look so much alien, they more looked like another type of human. But I imagine a type of extraterrestrial from our solar system, and I'm speculating here. This is
Sure.
speculation. Maybe they're more human like than someone from another star system and another time. So to me, the surprise was the feeling that these extraterrestrials were rather human like. So there are maybe there are humans that left the planet. Maybe our history is just bigger than we
That
understand.
one. That's what I
Yeah,
think it is. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it opens you up to these questions. Now, here's the thing. I have to say this. You can't verify any of these targets. You can't even verify the dinosaur target. It's our leading theory that the dinosaurs were destroyed in that Cretaceous period by a meteorite in the Chicxulub crater. Believe me, Science Magazine talks a lot about these different ideas, and can we verify it? And the debris that's found in different layers around the
Yeah.
Earth
Yeah.
at 65 million years, and I can believe that it was a meteorite. Seems very reasonable, and that's what I got in my session. But that doesn't prove it's true. And when you're going farther out at extraterrestrial targets, it's a lot less true than the Leaning Tower of Pisa because you can't verify what you got. So it's purely speculative, but it's somewhat fun to do this, isn't it?
Oh hell yeah,
Somewhat
I
fun
would.
to
If I knew, I would. I would do all those special things. You know, why
we
not?
we
Why wouldn't
we
you?
have we viewed we have viewed UFOs that are major news UFOs, like the Phoenix lights and so forth. And once the viewer has identified the target, we can send them inside the craft and see what they get. And that's always like exciting. Like you really feel like you're at the edge of the unknown. Like we're using viewing, like this is what it was really made for. Go inside the
Yes, I
craft.
agree on that.
Yeah,
From Ingo Swan's reports and stuff, I
yeah,
think it's Ingo Swan, so please bear
it
with me,
is.
where he reported that they then sensed him. Is
Yeah,
that right? So
right.
that's freaky, that bit. More so
Yeah,
than us going there, I think.
we've encountered that too.
And does that
We
lead to them following you and then coming to get you or anything random like that? Or is it just an awareness?
Well, not physically. The viewer I'm thinking of felt like he was asked to leave the craft. And he felt like he was being watched on the craft. This
Yeah.
was, I believe this was the Phoenix Lights targets, or maybe that object seen over Mexico City in 97, that big round object. And that particular viewer, I've run into him recently. He was a full professor in the CU engineering school.
Okay.
And he told me that after that session, he started channeling spontaneously.
Like he'd left the door open almost, and then they've walked through it. Yeah, that's the freaky side of things, I think, because then you get the unwanted guest.
Yeah, this is just reality. Is we're
Mm.
opening up the perception of the electromagnetic spectrum and into other frequency spectrums maybe we're not even aware of. Quantum frequency spectrums. We're opening the door here. We have people sign a release form when they take the class because I'm aware that this can occasionally happen.
Mm.
And this particular person told me he got a grip on it after a while, but it was very unnerving to have other voices come through his mouth when he was at a faculty meeting.
Oh no,
And
no,
that
you have to tell me what they said. I
I
quit.
asked, he told the other faculty members everything they had been doing but not talking about. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I don't know exactly what happened at these meetings, but he said it was a little unnerving because it wasn't voluntary channeling. It just was some entities that he felt, and he eventually felt like he got a handle on it and it was okay. So this is often the experience of, well, it's the experience of people sometimes is they encounter another aspect of themselves that no one told you about. It's like waking up from a dream. And this is the dream of physical reality. And there's your 9 to 5 job and this and that every day the same. And all of a sudden, boom, you're channeling extraterrestrials. I'm not suggesting everyone do this, but if you come to my RV classes, this can be some of the result of it. And I'm not going to even say it's common, but it happens from time to time. People have breakthroughs, and some of those breakthroughs are a little under. Quite. This is what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
You've had that feeling of going to sleep on your arm, especially as a kid, and waking up and it's pins and needles.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the RV effect is like a limb started to have pins and needles that you didn't know was there, and it wakes up like it was asleep your whole life, and it wakes up and there's another organ or limb that you didn't know you had. It's your non-local perception. I am telling you this as sincerely as I can. This has really happened, and we've had other people who've had effects in the class, good or bad. I had one woman in the class from Estes Park. We gave her, there's a building off of I-70 here that was in one of those Woody Allen movies called Sleeper. It's a round building called the UFO building. I just
Okay.
gave her this building. It's an interesting sort of target. Round building off of I-70, and she would know it. She's from Colorado. She would know this building. Well, she broke down in tears during this session. And we just attempted to get her to finish the session. She hadn't seen the feedback yet. The session had reminded her of a flying disc because it's a round building. And a memory came back of something coming over her family's home in Estes Park that was scary.
Mm.
She said it would hover over the house and make clicking sounds.
Yeah, that's
And it
unusual.
scared her. Yes. So a buried memory came back from just seeing a round building in that open state you're in during RV. About a week later, she called me and said she'd seen a UFO at the intersection Estes Park. Estes Park is a small tourist town at the very beautiful town at the foot of Rocky Mountain National Park. Been around for a long time. It's a very classy place to go. Has the Stanley Hotel. Well, she's from there, and she said she saw a green object the size of a VW Bug,
Mm-hmm.
Volkswagen car, the
Yeah,
iconic
yeah.
car, hovering off the ground at an intersection in front of her at the stop sign. She timed it on her watch, her car's clock. She estimates about 30 seconds it was there based on the clock. And then it shot off. And she said, I want to thank you, Simeon. If I hadn't done that session that opened me up to my experience as a kid with the flying discs over the house, I don't think I would have had that sighting. So you kind of see what's going on here is there's more reality going on. Is it that she was more open to this phenomena? Did the resonance of bringing the memory back make it okay for her mind to now see another anomalous UAP?
Or another
Your
spectrum or
guess is as good
something.
as mine.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. But this is
yeah.
the deeper discussion about RV, and this is why it's so fascinating and rewarding to be involved with it.
I can see now why you have to make people sign indemnities or whatever. Yeah, because they are opening up to a whole world of potentiality. Good or ill. I like it. I think it's a fascinating topic. Now let's turn 180 degrees. Well, let's just say 90 degrees. Like head towards crop circles. I've not spoken to anyone on the crop circle topic yet, so this is quite fascinating for me. So let's again define what a crop circle is. So if there is anyone out there who's never heard of them, what is it?
It's these patterns in grain crops that have appeared mostly in your country, in your neck of the woods, around
Mm-hmm.
Wiltshire, that are very large. This one was, like 800 feet across. They're not all that big, but there are these grain crop patterns that started showing up about 100 years ago, here and there. And there happened to be more and more of them in the 80s and 90s in the UK, and other countries started experiencing them. This was my first experience of a crop circle in an RV session. We were given this so-called Windmill Hill in Wiltshire, Triple Julia, just near Avebury.
Mm-hmm.
And I got so curious, what did I view? When I looked at my results, what I got were energy coming in and out of a circle with some hills nearby and some beings or people standing around. And I said, what is this? I'd never heard of crop circles in 96. I just have been in graduate school for a while. They didn't talk about these things, even in an agrarian area like Eastern Washington. So I went over on a crop circle tour with a fellow named Ron Russell from the Denver area. And he said, we don't know who's making them or how they're made or what, but we can show you around. So I was just curious. I wanted my feedback.
Yeah,
So I
don't blame
went
you.
over, and what we found, I was going to show you the first one I went. The first one I went in was that Coke Snowflake from Silbury Hill area in 97. And what we found was I was told, we don't know who's making this, what they are. The first thing I encountered were people telling me they had battery and camera failure in and around these crop circles. I wasn't sure, is this like urban legend, like people want to believe in something, like I want to believe, so I'm going to create a spooky story around my crop circle experience. No, it was really happening because I spoke to enough people. It was beyond the sample size that you'd expect. It was just people, telling you something that they thought that had happened. No, it happened to our own devices. And I saw it happen to Ron's camcorder. He put his Sony camcorder down in a crop circle called Danebury Triad outside of Andover. And when we picked it up a few minutes later, it was hot and it wasn't working. He had left it on, but not filming. And the solder joints had melted.
Whoa.
And it had to be sent back to Sony. And they said, we have to resolder everything. So I could see from my experience, these patterns have been appearing for a long time. They're associated with UFO sightings. During the 80s and 90s, it does appear there were more of them in the UK and that people had gotten involved in reproducing these and making them bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it was a big story at that stage. I remember it in the papers.
Yeah, it was gathering a lot of media attention. And people that I know, I didn't think people could make these circles. And we used to use a static meter, by the way, to measure static electricity to see if we could reproduce it ourselves, the static charge. And what we ended up finding is that there are a lot of static anomalies in these circles with our Trek meter, and that it did indeed affect people's batteries. I saw this over and over again. And what we found is that eventually even the man-made ones were affecting cameras and batteries. The people that were making them called it natural magic, and they were deliberately keeping it secret because they wanted the magic to keep going. Now, there were some that were public, like The German researchers, Koch and Kyberg, will make a formation every year and say, we're making this in public. We want to communicate with the circle making intelligence. And right by their formation, there was a ball of light that someone photographed. We were just out on Woodborough Hill. I was there at the time, and someone was coming to meet us. And down in the field was this formation, and this orb showed up right over it. So this is what happened with the crop circles, is that we found that even the man-made ones were producing these paranormal effects.
I didn't know that about the fake ones. Whoa.
Yes. What we found is that the so-called fake ones were actually electromagnetically active and producing orbs and so forth. And even when we made them ourselves, we would get some of these anomalies. And we initially found someone named Matt Williams, and he took us out for a paid formation, this R over at Pattern, and around 2000. And these people had been doing this for quite a while at night, but they hadn't really publicized themselves very much, and no one really believed them anyway. When they said they came forward, they said they were hoaxers. But they actually weren't doing it to create hoaxes. They really felt this was like a natural magic, at least the circle makers I met. And so I eventually was allowed to see another one done at night at Cheryl. I didn't participate in making it. I stood there and watched this team do it, and they were much better than I expected them to be. They had communication with walkie-talkies, rope pulls, signals, lasers. They were quite competent. They had a military precision about them. There's only 4 or 5 hours of, as you know, in the summer in the UK. There's only a very short nighttime. They can do this, and these patterns affected our static meter the next day. So what we found is that the man-made ones were electromagnetically active too, and that there are both types. There are some that are hard to explain. It could be due to plasma vortices and dust devils and so forth. UFO created ones. I've spoken to witnesses that have seen flying discs. In my book, Black Swan Ghosts, one of the witnesses I interviewed was Louise Vovez from Usk, Washington, from Idaho, picking huckleberries with her brother in Usk, Washington, and in the national forest there, and seeing a disc come over and flatten as it left, flatten the meadow. And it sounded to me a lot like crop circles. I mean, it didn't make a crop circle, but she said it was flat as a pancake. I mean, flattened, just like people have reported around crop circles. So I'm certain that these UFOs and UAP make some of these, as I think Doug Bauer from Doug and Dave team, the two guys from the pub. I mean, he was inspired by the Tully saucer nests in Australia, where he worked at the time, and he was an artist, and he came back to the UK wondering if he could recreate them. The circle makers I spoke to, Koit, originally said they weren't even sure they could make them, but they were surprised they weren't bad. Just initially one of these groups said they just got down and rolled around. I mean, they were teenagers and they had to be back by a certain time, parents. So they didn't have a lot of time, and they just went and rolled around and made a circle, and they were surprised that there was media attention the next day. But they started making them bigger and bigger. But what we found was that the human circle makers told me they would see orbs, small flying black triangles come over their formations.
As they're working.
Yes. Shadow people, and space-time distortions. And I believed them, because having gone out with them in the daytime and some at night, it was really the only way to find out if they could do it, was to go out there with them. And what I found from them is that there were paranormal phenomena going out there while they were making this. I know this sounds like heresy to people who believe that no human could ever make patterns like that, but this was one of the ones we made, our American group. I mean, it's not super sophisticated, but it's something. We paid the fine for that. Yeah. The Devil's Den one, by the way, was the one I saw 3 devices go kaput in half an hour. My static meter, camcorder, and that GPS with the batteries. I showed you the picture of that. Rob Spate, who I recorded him saying we had 14 hours of battery life when we came in, and it's just gone. So what we saw from the patterns of the circles is that helical spiral patterns act almost like a metamaterial that we've heard about a lot from the UFO research, like a liquid crystal creating anomalous static fields, types of electromagnetic interactions that we're not used to. I was never prepared that wheat, which seems like an insulator, could have electromagnetic effects. But there's the work of Russian researcher Grabinikov, who investigated the cavernous structure effect, and he thought that coherent geometrical patterns could affect the frequency of water, even affect clouds and things like that. Um, so I'm sure there's an important science behind this, uh, because there's a new field called topological insulators that I read about in Science Magazine quite a bit. It's how insulators can become conductors. To me, that is, just from the mathematical uh, properties of the object, the number of windings, for example, around in a spiral and so forth.
Okay, so
So the thing about it is that if insulators can become conductors, to me it sounded a lot like wheat insulator becoming conductor, electromagnetic field, and so forth. So the crop circles is a complex topic with a lot of interesting science behind it.
yeah, now you've opened my mind to something new there. With I didn't know that the fake circles, so to speak, the man-made ones, also had the paraphernalia surrounding them. So that's not paraphernalia, paranormal phenomena. So that's highly interesting and something I'm going to have to look at separately. Looking at a real, what we would class as a true crop circle, what are the basic characteristics of it? Is there a commonality?
Yeah, a lot of them have the wheat or grain crop pointing now in the same direction in swirls on the ground, often in spirals. They have a certain coherency to them with the way that the stalks are now pointing on the ground. Um, and you'll often find strange electromagnetic effects around them. I'm not saying every single time. I'm estimating maybe 5% of the circles we've been in have had those effects, but we've seen it summer after summer. And I have a playlist on my YouTube channel of weird crop circle effects.
Effects on people, you mean, like our
On
brains and that?
cameras and
Or
equipment. I
oh,
mean, that
okay,
I've been
yeah.
able to record if my cameras and batteries were still working. So people can look at my YouTube channel, look for the weird crop circle effects for video after video of people saying, what happened to my watch? What happened to my camera? My battery life, orbs. So the characteristics are sort of a coherent pattern in grain crops that generally tends to be circular and have a precision to it across the entire pattern where it forms shapes that we're familiar with, often spiral types of shapes. And then the circle will be there either until the farmer harvests it or the crop will kind of, the plants are still alive, they'll kind of come back up. So a predominant number of these have been in the UK, but there are in other countries too. And I think over the years, there's a great book, The Secret History of Crop Circles by Terry Wilson, which is in print again, I'm glad to say. Secret History of Crop, which goes back into the history of these, going back 100 years. So this goes back before the modern era of crop circles. But people did get involved in making them, and I've met a lot of these groups. To me, they weren't hoaxers. They were, you know, uh, artists. They believed that there was an effect of this, a positive effect on people to be in these circles. And I have to agree with them. I mean, it got me interested in topological insulators and metamaterials. And when I talk to scientists who've been involved with UFO crash materials and science behind UFOs, UAP, they tell me that metamaterials, topological insulators are literally the basis for the technology of UFOs and their propulsion systems. In other words, metamaterials are materials that bend electromagnetic wavelengths and waves into other frequencies and can even interact with light to create cloaking and invisibility. So metamaterials is a very important topic, and it seems to be the key to how a very thin hull on a UFO could actually bend space-time metric engineering, as it's called, interact directly with the quantum vacuum, as I've been told by other engineers of how these materials work, to literally engineer materials at an atomic level that can bend electromagnetic frequencies to the point where you literally change the structure of space-time.
That is all mind bending
And that
completely.
came from me from crop circles. I mean, in my research, attempting to understand. So I would say that there's a big scientific basis behind them. The EM effects are just one aspect of it, but it definitely has something to do with how the shape of inert materials can create active electronic effects.
And that's mind, like I said just a second ago, it's mind blowing in and of itself that just a shape can has have a separate effect. Do you think the two
Right.
would never be linked? Now, is
Right.
it harnessing energy from the earth and then that shape is then almost projecting outwards, or is it something else?
Right. That's something like that. It's acting like a waveguide. And
Yeah.
perhaps that some of them have the right ratios and resonance from the shape, the right frequency. If you were able to measure the frequency from the diameter of the circle and compute what that frequency with that circle versus that circle, or these more fractal like patterns where it's very self similar based around the golden mean spiral, golden section.
Yeah.
What frequencies are they interacting with? But I mean, something's going on there because I have seen so many devices conk out so quickly. Sometimes they don't come back to life for a while, a couple months,
It's
and then
very
they come back.
Skinwalker Ranchy, isn't it? You know, the same phenomenon.
It is. And you see the orbs in and around the crop circles. And this is why my point of view, and not saying people have to agree with this, I think we're dealing with the same underlying phenomena, whether it's UFOs or crop circles or RV or cryptids, just from a phenomenological point of view, is that you get the orbs, you get the space-time distortions.
Mm. It's all
And
linked with electromagnetics, isn't it? Everything seems to
yeah,
be
yeah,
linked with
yeah, yeah.
that.
It seems to be all of these subjects seem to be non-ordinary EM fields.
Mm. It's a mind bender, like I said. What is the current idea and leading theory on who makes these or what process?
The crop circles?
Mm-hmm.
Well, to me, I would say the vast majority of them are now man-made that we've seen in recent years, and this is why they change uh, locations where you see more of them from year to year. But
So would you
perhaps,
say then that even the ones currently happening in England are
yeah.
mainly fake?
Well, I would say so. Just having run into those groups when I've been out there, even in recent years, and I've run into them, and I ask who they are, and they say, "Oh, well, we take pictures of them, and we like to see what they look like on the ground the next day too." So there's still
That's
groups out there doing that. I've run into them, and um, they're artists and people that enjoy shapes and math and so forth. But again, as I've said, those they're not fake in the sense that, I mean, if they were fake, they wouldn't be creating orbs and non-ordinary EM effects and so forth. There's something real about the shapes, even
mm.
if they're not made spontaneously by an ET craft or um, by a plasma vortex or something like this, or a dust devil. I've seen those dust devils, by the way, in your country. They're pretty strong. They can go right across a wheat field,
Oh
and
yeah.
I've seen some of those patterns um, where I could look at it and say that looks like a wind vortex to me because it's not very neat looking and it's a little rough. So there's a variety of types of causes of shapes, but the big take home lesson for us seems to be that when you create coherent, mathematically precise shapes in grain crop, you get an electronic effect. I used to build kits as a kid. I mean, I was a really young kid. I spend my paper route money on kits from a place called Heathkit and Radio Shack, these companies in the US that would build these little kits for hobbyists to put together. So I
Mm-hmm.
was familiar with the parameters of ordinary electronic circuits. So to see this happening in a wheat field where you go in, I mean, this has happened to professional film crews. When I was filming with National Geographic once near Silbury Hill, that oldest, biggest earth mound in Europe, right outside of Avebury,
Mm-hmm.
I was told that they were familiar with the BBC having their cameras affected uh, by these when they went out to film. So it's happened a lot, but people don't know what it is and they don't talk to other people and they think it's just an isolated event. But it happens repeatedly. And it shows us we're dealing with a non-ordinary type of space-time, which would explain some of these EM effects because they're really not something you've ever seen before. It's not just like something you can easily measure with an EM meter. It's more like what we were talking about earlier in the interview, where it's these non-ordinary, non-EM field effects. They're different types of they're non-Maxwellian or kind of like extended Maxwellian effects. More like I would call it a fractal electromagnetic type of process.
And yeah. Now you know the whole sound pattern thing.
Yes,
where you have a resonance on a plate and the sand dances in the shape like crop circles. Like you've seen on Ancient Aliens and stuff. They've looked into that process. Is it that, but with electromagnetic energy that then produces the shape? Is it a natural process? Is what I'm getting at of the Earth.
Some of them may be produced that way. I don't think the ones that I saw in the 90s in the UK. I think those were mostly man-made.
Okay.
By the way, since you were mentioning cymatics on that History Channel show In Search Of, season 2, episode 5, I believe. I'm in that episode because they had me go down to Texas to look at an area where there have been a lot of UFO sightings in a place called Stephenville in 2008.
Oh yeah, Stephenville Lights, wasn't it, or something?
Yeah, it was big objects. We talked to witnesses who'd seen the craft and everything. A pilot who had seen it and so forth. It's fascinating. And we covered cymatics there a little bit, where we put the sand on a metal plate. And the point is that when you project sound into a material like sand that's motile, moves around, you can create these very coherent patterns that look like crop circles. So then you have to wonder if the circle also can create a frequency, just like the frequency can create the shape.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, reverse engineering itself, sort of thing. Yes. I want to, for these next few questions, let's just go down some theoreticals and almost discount the man-made ones, because I think that's the way my mind wants to go here at the moment. And I'm not discounting the data. I'm just want to go down the theoretical. If these things aren't a natural process and they aren't man-made, what would you suggest they are in itself? Are they signposts in time or a location? What would you think they then would be? Assuming a UFO created them, let's just say that, or an orb.
Well, I would say they're a type of communications, not necessarily a formal message or something like that, but a type of communications if they were to be created like that. It would be something that, there's so much differences between the circles. So you really have to go out and look at each one. But if there were one where you could clearly see, like the witness I talked to in Usk, where it's flattening a meadow, it didn't, in her case, it didn't flatten it into a shape. It just left. By the way, in that case, the military closed the area off for a couple of weeks while they took measurements, because they tried to go back to pick huckleberries and there were Jeeps parked. So it's a good question. And I think based on my experience, the ones that I've seen, I would feel comfortable saying they were man-made. With good intentions, not to fool people, but just to see if they could go out and create some sort of magical condition space. And the other ones, some of them would seem to be randomly produced by weather conditions. If the ones that were seen around UFOs, were they intentional or not? It's a good question.
Because they could be a side effect of the craft, just like the other thing you said going across.
They could be a side effect of the propulsion system. And the early circles, we have to keep in mind, Koit, were pretty simple and round. Anyone who looks at the history of these before the 80s, they were pretty much round circles and groups of circles. So,
what's the earliest one we've got recorded?
I think in the secret history of crop circles, Wilson goes back to the early 1900s.
So way, way old, way before people would be faking these things with planks and string.
So. I mean, there are references in the Bible to strange markings in the fields, which we don't know exactly what they're talking about.
Because we're chicken and an egg this, aren't we? Because they ain't going to be fake then. Well, there might be, but it's unlikely. So is the fakers these days, are they imitating what they see?
Yeah, they would have been imitating, improving.
Yeah.
And if you spend any time with them, it would be like challenging themselves to make better and better patterns, more sophisticated patterns. I mean,
What do you
eventually
think then about
it's like
the?
this, really large and
Yeah. Now,
fast.
when I was asking you about the characteristics earlier, I know there's something going on with the nodes that have been exploded that I know the fakers can't do. Where does that sit in with what you think re fakes and stuff?
I think that's been misinterpreted. We found some of the same effects in the ones we made.
Oh,
So what we saw was that the phototropic effect on these plants, and I know people will disagree with me on this, but we saw the enlarged nodes. I have photos of it. After a day or two, the plant would attempt to right itself back up, and it moves at the node. So perhaps that area is being filled with water. So I think that's been a little misinterpreted as some sort of microwave radiation or something like that.
yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah,
That's just based on my experience.
sure. No, I understand. It's a fascinating topic. Now, what about the black helicopters and then the orbs physically seen? Because I did watch some videos. I'm sure you've seen them, the Andrew Buckley videos. From the late 90s or whatever, where you had the orbit going quite fast across the screen and then the black
Yeah,
helicopters around and stuff.
yeah,
What's
yeah.
going on there?
That's a really good question. I think these objects are around us a lot of the time. Um, the orbs are certainly seen in and around the crop circle areas.
Yeah.
And yeah, that Andy Buckley footage, I think I know because Colin Andrews used to show that footage to us and talk about it. And it kind of moves behind the helicopter. They're trying to, yeah. I've seen those orbs myself with my own eyes. I made a short video for YouTube recently of the one I saw over West Overton. Below a cloud. It was hanging below a cloud and just glittering. What does that up in the sky below a cloud?
I don't
And
know.
helicopters came towards it and it went out.
Even there,
I
where you
saw it.
saw
I
it.
recorded it with my video camera. I was just out in West Overton. I was literally thinking of making patterns of circles. I mean, what would I make? It was just sort of an imaginary exercise. And then this orb shows up right there. And its sun's going down, it's getting dark, and it's glittering below um, uh, the cloud. And then it went out just abruptly. But I have some video of it. So I've seen this sort of phenomena. And people I talk to, including the circle makers and other people, we've seen those orbs, and they're around these sort of paranormal hotspots in different places. I think they are very similar to the Hessdalen lights, but they do seem sometimes to have some intention to them. I mean, they're playing with helicopters and moving around. So going back to this theme, overlapping phenomenology, which we talked about at the beginning, there is an overlapping phenomenology from ball lightning to UFOs. Even cut and dried ball lightning researchers admit some of them seem awfully intelligent. They seem to act like UFOs. But ball lightning in and of itself, these orbs do naturally arise in certain locations. They're, they can be a naturally occurring type of cluster of charges that forms what we call coherent matter. But it's a really good question whether they have intentionality, if someone else is harnessing them like a technology. It's an open question, something I think about a lot.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has the answer that I've ever spoken to, but I would love to. Again, it's one of those things you want to know the answer to. Is the ball of light what makes the crop circles? Are they a result of the crop circles? Are they a result of intentionality? Are they a result of the black helicopters forcing them there? Are they a result of the ley lines and water, all that stuff running under the ground at like specialized points on the earth that then creates that plasma ball or whatever? I don't know.
Yeah, they could have a lot of sources.
Mm,
They do seem connected to flowing water.
yeah.
Uh, and they're connected to this whole area that's called exotic vacuum objects, as named by Ken Shoulders. But I mean, other people have called them different names over the years.
I haven't heard that phrase before, exotic vacuum objects.
Yeah, a colleague of Hal Putoff's at SRI, Ken Shoulders, got so interested in these. He originally called them strong electrons, electron validium, and then he changed it to exotic vacuum objects because they have a lot of interesting properties. And other people have called them ectons. and there are different names for these objects. So they're a type of lab-produced ball lightning that has very interesting EM effects and other types of effects that seem almost paranormal. I mean, there was a lot of Soviet research into these objects in the lab. Uh, and when they finally got a photo of one of these ball lightnings, a Chinese team found them photographing thunderstorms, captured a ball lightning. It had the same spectrographic signature as the lab produced ball lightning. So it would appear to be the same sort of thing. You can, even Tesla was experimenting with this, these pulsed discharge devices. You basically pile up a lot of electrons all at once and they kind of bunch up. And if the conditions are right and they're at the same frequency, they'll form these orbs, which are a type of quantum coherent matter.
So that does
And
suggest then that balls of light in these scenarios are a natural process.
right. So when you have coherent shapes, it's like you get coherent orbs, ball lightning. So it does seem to fit, right? Is the coherency of the ball lightning, which can last from a few seconds to a few minutes to a few days or even a few weeks in a lab setting. It seems to match the coherency of the crop pattern. There's a precision there. So
That light is trying to get your eyes, isn't it? I could see it. Is it coming through the curtains or something?
this is the strength of the Colorado sun. Yeah, coming in.
It is trying to get you.
That is a reflection. Oh, that's a car hood, a car bonnet.
You got a car hood over there, have you?
Reflecting light
Whoa.
through a cracked open door.
Right, let's move slightly before we enter the Koit zone, because we've got about 20 minutes left and I need 10 minutes for the Koit zone. So let's move slightly ajar. So I want to hit some of your books. First one being Dark Matter Monsters, Cryptids, Ball Lightning, and the Science of Secret Life Forms. What's the story of that book? What drove you to write it?
Teaching remote viewing in Boulder, I met a lot of Colorado natives. And over the years, they told me of encountering Bigfoot. I didn't know what to make of it at first because I had listened to shows, overnight radio shows in the US that had convinced me from their cryptozoologists that these were a type of rare animal, like a rare ape. And there were people, researchers years ago. One of them worked above me at WSU, Grover Krantz, in the anthropology department, who believed they were a type of an extinct relic primate. But the more research I did, I found that there were the same odd electromagnetic effects that I had encountered around crop circles around Bigfoot. Even witnesses around here and at some of the conferences I went to in Bailey, Colorado. The researchers, some of whom had been doing this, like Igor Burtsev from Russia, who've been doing this for 50 years, they were adamant that there were paranormal effects around these creatures, camera failure, battery failure, orbs. It started to sound familiar to me. So what I began to realize is that these creatures are made of another type of matter than we are, or they're accessing other types of electromagnetic properties that we're not very skilled in to generate coherent frequencies and coherent matter and literally create orbs, which is what people see around them. Through perhaps sound or some other mechanism, they're able to create what crop circles seem to represent, which is a high degree of precision in matter, which leads to coherent electromagnetic effects that relates to what we know about ball lightning and that whole family of matter that's called coherent matter, which can lead to this Uranov-Bohm effect, like we talked about earlier in the show, a type of directed energy process. A lot of the witnesses I've talked to have said the creatures could make really loud howling, screaming sounds, which is people have talked to, that you can feel vibrating in your body, like being in front of a speakers at a rock concert, that volume. And yet other people in the camp wouldn't hear it. And I asked one of them the other day. In fact, it's on my YouTube channel. It's an interview with a guy named Steve. I asked him right there, well, how's that possible? And he said it's like they have a directed energy capacity. They can focus sound. That is very reminiscent of coherent matter. And cold fusion, low energy nuclear reaction, which is basically a type of micro ball lightning. And researchers have found that what cold fusion appears to be is a type of controlled micro ball lightning produced in the lab. And the researcher Takeaki Matsumoto in Japan, who passed away earlier last year, talked about him believing this was a type of electromagnetic, electronuclear collapse in the lab around these cold fusion experiments. And there were so many similarities between what I was reading about cold fusion, low energy nuclear reaction, and people's experiences around Bigfoot and other cryptids, plus my own experience in the crop circles of seeing that anomalous EM type of activity. It led me to believe there's a whole different type of matter that we're encountering on Earth that's beyond ordinary liquids, solids, and gases, or even plasmas, a type of self-organized plasma state, which covers cold fusion, cryptids, ball lightning, UFOs, and remote viewing.
So if I were to put this into layman's terms, it's almost, let's just say, the Bigfoot consciousness, so to speak, is creating its own matter to then become almost like a corporeal form. So it's becoming right. a living being for a period of time and then or exiting itself. Do you know what I mean? Back to the consciousness level. Is that what you're putting it at?
Yeah, because the witnesses I've talked to said they've literally seen it go invisible in front of their eyes so that their dog, the animals react to these creatures in very strange ways. It's not something I was taught to believe in my high school or any of my education in the way any one of us were taught. But these creatures are real. I've talked to many people that have encountered them, and some of them have described this invisibility factor. And I believe they are doing what we are attempting to do with metamaterials. They just naturally know how to do it, which is create coherent electromagnetic frequencies and behavior such that the material itself can bend light, cloak light, create invisibility. And in the book, I go into some of these patents from defense contractors where they talk about generating coherent matter wave beams with the Aharonov-Bohm effect for cloaking, invisibility, directed energy. And that's exactly the same type of phenomena we see around Bigfoot. There's a movie about it people can watch called Paranormal Bigfoot, Flash of Beauty Paranormal Bigfoot, which I actually star in. I actually star in this movie, so you'll see my smiling face.
You're not the Bigfoot, are you? I can see it now, yeah.
It's a sequel to Bigfoot Revealed. It's the same crew that did the first movie, Flash of Beauty. It's on Amazon or Vimeo. And it has, if anyone is curious about the paranormal aspects of these creatures, you will see witness after witness in that movie that describe telepathic mind speak when they're around these creatures, seeing them, but then the camera sees something more shimmering, like the predator effect, an invisibility factor. And there are even witnesses in the movie that talk about seeing them turn into orbs in front of their eyes. They couldn't believe it, but both witnesses saw it, and shoot off at high speeds. The witnesses I've talked to here in Colorado have said the same thing. So when you get disparate witnesses reporting the same effects, you have to conclude. I think you have to conclude from a modern perspective, we're dealing with a hidden event. It's something that many people have experienced, but they're not talking about a lot for the reasons we talked about at the beginning of the show: fear of ostracism, ridicule, loss of social status, and so forth. So my view is that there are other types of life forms on the planet that are using some of those principles we learned about in crop circles. How those humans learned to create those bigger circles with the precision, why that led to something to do with cryptids and Bigfoot, to me, is an amazing story in and of itself. But we're dealing with other types of matter. And the reason I call it dark matter monsters is we know most of the universe is made of a type of matter that we can't see directly and interacts with us in indirect ways called dark matter. This is what astrophysicists tell us. And I'm simply arguing here, if that's true, there's most likely life forms that are based on this invisible matter. And based on the behavior and the phenomena we see around Bigfoot and other types of cryptids, it seems very similar to the type of phenomena you get around dark matter. And some of the types of dark matter we know about, relic neutrinos from the cosmic background radiation, which seem to play an important role in cold fusion. So basically what I'm seeing here is a larger paradigm that contain all of these so-called paranormal phenomena. I'm suggesting what we call paranormal is this non-ordinary alternate electromagnetic types of fields that has very strong quantum principles around it, some of which are Aharonov-Bohm effect. This isn't some sort of weird metaphysics. We're talking about physics as we know it. Aharonov-Bohm effect, fractal electromagnetics, as Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project calls it, Bob Greenyer, fractal electromagnetic, fractal toroidal shapes. These are shapes that have no EM fields emitted or beyond them, but inside they're highly condensed, strong electromagnetic fields. And this comes out of a lot of Russian research going back to the 1950s, actually, in the Soviet Union, where they were talking about hypertoroidal types of shapes and so forth, non-ordinary EM fields. This is not like an alternative to Maxwell and Maxwellian physics as we understand it. It's an extension of it. It's an extension of it, bringing it into the modern age with fractal types of shapes, which could compress electromagnetics all the way down to the 0-point field, as the Soviets concluded. The Soviet ball lightning research created what they called, and these were KGB project, electromagnetic phantoms, invisible ball lightning. They could measure this in the lab. They could turn the equipment off, and that shape would remain there for 2 days. They could still measure it with no energy going into it, a self-sustaining phantom-like shape that you could measure was there, but you couldn't actually see anymore.
How very odd.
Yeah, and some of those researchers said they could keep those shapes alive for weeks. Again, what Ken Shoulders talked about black ball lightning. He called them, he had names for them, black plasmas and black evos. But basically, Ken Shoulders, even in his research, found that there was a whole realm of this lab-produced ball lightning, which created an invisible type of electromagnetic entity, which could sustain itself if it had access to electrons and so forth. Think about some of these hotspots like Skinwalker Ranch that are formed over areas of gilsonite, which are carbon-type materials with lots of free electrons. That there's an invisible component to it. Even Ken Shoulders created the idea of this being what we call dark matter, these charge clusters, self-sustained charge clusters. So the fact that we see this coming from American research, Soviet research, Chinese research shows me, and I'm making the argument, of course someone could argue something differently, we're really dealing with all the same type of phenomena here. You could call it electromagnetic phantom. For lack of a better word, you could call it a ghost, or you could call it ball lightning, but it all seems to be the same sort of thing. It has a large invisible component. That doesn't mean it's not there. There are life forms that seem to know how to navigate, based on my conversations with witnesses I've talked to. We're saying the same thing that other people have talked to. Ron Moorhead, Sierra Sounds, so forth, even Stan Gordon with his research, Silent Invasion, Creepy Cryptids. You read Stan Gordon's book, you will see this over and over again. These very strange life forms, which we don't have names for, that the witnesses claim can just disappear in a flash, just like that, are seen around UFOs. To me, it seems like just a whole range of phenomena that would be consistent with an extension of Maxwell's electromagnetism, fractal electromagnetism, or fractal toroidal shapes.
I had Stan on a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
and he went down this, whole linked with UFOs and the orbs and everything. We discussed that whole topic, and he's heavily leaning towards what you're suggesting.
And can I say something quite about it?
Of course.
The reason we don't know about this, and it takes really excellent researchers like Stan from a lifetime of research to come to this conclusion, this is the stuff of black budget projects, because it does have security implications, invisibility, just think about it. Life
Hmm.
forms, invisibility, cloaking, UFOs, propulsion systems. When you get into this area, you're getting into special access programs. We know they don't share their information with the public. I can tell you from having talked to a former uh, Pentagon official that our intelligence agencies here in the US were monitoring the Soviet PK experiments, and they concluded they were real. This individual said he was in a room with 30 people when a Soviet PK practitioner bent a spoon in Moscow from 1,000 miles away.
Mm.
And they all heard it in real time as the spoon bent. This was in 76, and he gave me permission to write about it. So that story's in Dark Matter Monsters. But this is an example where the government knew for a matter of fact that PK and RV are real. You look in ChatGPT and you put in the words remote viewing, and you'll get this statement back from uh, OpenAI that this is not scientifically proven. There's no evidence it's real. And you'll get the same thing for Bigfoot and a lot of these other paranormal phenomena, because I've checked ChatGPT 4.0 to see what it says about these phenomena. It can have an intelligent response, and it doesn't. It comes back with the idea it's not proven. And yet this this official who had one of the highest security clearances in the Pentagon told me they knew point blank that PK was real because they were listening in. I asked him why they didn't share this as a news story. PK proven to be real by U.S. intelligence agency? Nope. Sources and methods for these folks outrank public information, public disclosure. And if that was happening in the 70s, I'd still have, it's happening now. So
Of course.
it is proven. It's scientifically proven. That's as proven as you can be when you have multiple sources listening in on an experiment.
Well, I like the overall theory of it anyway, and especially re dark matter. We know it exists as a thing because, like you said with astronomy, they say the absence of matter is the dark matter. We just haven't understood it, and then using that to say there's this whole spectrum of things that could be living within that dark matter. I think that's going to give me a lot of food for thought over the next few days. Put it that way.
Yeah, and let me just tell you something. Takeaki Matsumoto, the Japanese cold fusion researcher,
Mm-hmm.
Who was banned from publishing in Fusion and Technology magazine, a U.S. publication, in the 70s. Excuse me, in the 90s. He was banned because of mentioning the word ball lightning. Can you imagine? Not UFOs. He just mentioned. He concluded that what we call cold fusion is a type of electronuclear collapse that creates micro black holes and interacts with dark matter at a subatomic level, at a micro, let's say a molecular level, because he was able to take photographs with his electron microscope of all these dark collapsed sections within his, deuterium palladium experiments, where the material had literally collapsed like a black hole. And he called them, he basically said that these micro ball lightnings, and Boyd Bushman, a Lockheed engineer, came to the same conclusion, as did Ken Shoulders. It's literally interacting with dark matter. It's a type of
wasn't
structure.
Boyd Bushman the guy that was saying all about UFOs on his deathbed? So that one.
Yeah,
Same
he
name.
was that. Yeah, he also had a lot to talk about this dark neutrino universe. He's basically saying the same things that I'm saying to you, because I learned some of it from reading his literature. But here's the thing, Koit. It's not just one person saying it. It's Bushman, it's Ken Shoulders, it's Takeaki Matsumoto, it's Alexander Parkhomov, another former Soviet Russian researcher that looked into cold fusion. His reactor worked for 225 days. And yet Google recently tried to reproduce the Parkhomov 225-day reactor. Couldn't do it. They didn't actually follow what he did. There's so many things that have to make it. It's a resonant reaction. It's not a kinetic reaction. It's a resonance reaction. It's like an instrument. It's got to be tuned. It's hard for modern science to understand. It's got to be tuned so carefully to get it to work. But what I'm saying is these results have been reproduced by so many researchers over the years in so many different locations. And it's all been given so many different types of names because it's never quite come together for a variety of reasons. Modern science wants reproducibility, but they don't want to take the time to set up the experiments very carefully. And the experiments are a little finicky. But you also have all these government programs that have attempted to use this for military applications on all sides of the planet. So for a variety of reasons, we're still learning about this. But for me, if you get the results reproduced by so many different scientists over so many different continents, over so many different decades, even going back to a character we know so well, Tesla, Nikola Tesla. You would say, look, we're getting consistent results. It may not be as easily explainable as we've been used to. It's not just like turning a key in your car to turn the engine on. But if these people get these results and they can get them lasting for a long time, to me, that's a whole paradigm there. That's
certainly worth pursuing. And maybe, when enough people like you are talking about it, it'll eventually open enough minds, to quote your book, opening minds, to then get more people to investigate it and then coalesce into a big research area. Who knows? But for now, Simeon, we're going to quickly enter the Koit zone. Koit zone! In the Koit zone, I just ask you random questions all about yourself. So first thing, what is your favorite type of music?
I love rock and roll music and folk music, and that's why I play guitar too.
I watched your one of your YouTube videos the other day. You do a lot of instrumentals, don't you? Can you sing or not?
Yes, I've been working on my voice for the past year or so, and it's gotten stronger and stronger. And that is fascinating in itself. I know you got another question, but I started thinking about the sounds that Bigfoot makes. Because when you start singing, there's a resonant feedback when it's really working well, and you can get really loud when everything's working correctly with your whole breathing and vocal system. And I started thinking, isn't that what Bigfoot's doing there? They got the frequencies down so well they can actually knock people over with their voices. So yeah, I love my first concert was Led Zeppelin in '77 at Madison Square Garden.
Excellent stuff. I thought you played guitar very, very well, by the way.
Thank you.
I've always been sort of like slightly jealous of people who play guitar because I want to do it, but I just don't commit myself to doing it for whatever reason.
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, there is that. I don't like the idea that my fingers might get all buggered up at the end, so you know what I mean? I don't want the calluses.
Nails.
Oh, yeah. What is the oldest piece of clothing you own?
I'm ashamed to say. Yes. Is it
underpants?
No. It's probably this shirt that's a little worn out. I don't know what my oldest piece of clothing. Let's say probably some blue jeans.
Okay. You find a time machine and it has enough power left for a one-way trip. When and where are you going?
I think I would like to go back to the past to see things like the Ark of the Covenant and some of these technologies. I suspect that what you or I are talking about here, and MFMP have talked about this a lot, Martin Fleisch Memorial Project. Are we rediscovering something that people knew in the past and we forgot? I'd like to know for certain to see some of this stuff.
Cool. But then you wouldn't be able to tell anyone about it, would you? Because you'd be stuck there.
No, we'd be stuck there.
That's the problem. But at least you'd know. And that's the satisfaction. Favorite film?
I think some of my favorite films, I think some of those Star Trek films. I grew up watching Star Trek as a kid on a black and white TV. And when they finally came to the big screen, that was just amazing to see Kirk and Spock in a full-length movie. So I think for me, those were definitely those and some other sci-fi films over the years, certainly memorable.
Great stuff. I'm a big Star Trek fan, so love Star Trek. Apart from the motion picture, which has bits, but it's not the best, is it? It's number 2's the best there.
Oh, right. That was a good one.
Yeah. Do you have any phobias?
Do I have any phobias? It's not spiders. I'm not afraid of spiders, though sometimes when I see them, I get a little strange feeling. No, I don't think of any particular phobias off the top of my head. I have been at the top of some of these mountains here in the Rockies. And when you get up there at 14,000 feet, there is this height thing. But I wouldn't call that a phobia. It's just
that's just a healthy, yeah.
I think I prefer lower elevations. 14,000 feet is nice to visit for a little while.
No, I agree with you. I love doing that, but I just think it's a healthy need to stay alive is what that is, probably. Okay, what would you say is the best thing you've ever done?
I think the best thing I've ever done, there has to be 2 prizes here. It's either some of these books I've written, which I feel very proud of putting together, it just feels very good to put something together and have people say it helped them understand something. That's very rewarding. And I think some of the songs I've written, when I listen to them again years later, I go, darn, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. You know, the person me 30 years ago, 20 years ago, writing some of these songs, I'm listening to them and said, some of those are pretty darn good. And I think some of the recent ones I've been working on with incorporating some of these ideas into the songs, some of those, I think when people hear them, they can go to my SoundCloud. They're not out yet on a CD. Some of those I think are pretty masterful when I listen to them, even later on. So
Excellent. I'll link to your SoundCloud in the description to this video.
please
So
do,
anyone
yeah,
who's
please.
interested, go ahead and listen.
Yeah.
Can you cook?
Yes, I love cooking. And fortunately, I had a mom who showed me how to cook a couple basic meals before I left for college. She
Good stuff.
showed me how to cook rice, how to steam vegetables, how to saute meats and things like this.
How to boil an
And
egg and cook toast.
yeah, and to this day, I find cooking fun. And it's just because it's like a chemistry project. It's amazing to see some of these food products change their form in front of your eyes to go from something that doesn't seem super edible. And 20 minutes later, you just added the right temperatures, right?
Mm.
And the right spices. And all of a sudden, it's delicious. To me, that's like a type of magic. And I think people underestimate the value of food, being able to prepare our own food. Like my pet dog can't do that. Yeah, he doesn't have, I have to make his food for him. And he probably can't catch his own food very much. So for us, the ability to cook, use heat, that's incredible. That's
By the
incredible.
way, when you're not around, he does actually cook. He just doesn't share it with you.
Yeah, right, right.
What did you last win?
Last win. Let's see. Well, the one I can remember is being at I think it was at Universal Studios with a friend of mine in Hollywood. And it was a huge crowd, and they hit a golf ball. And there were like hundreds of people there. And it came, I just lifted my hand, it came right into my hand from
Oh, that's cool.
like 100 yards away. It just was coming over, and I was like, what is it?
And what did you win from that? Just the pride of catching that ball.
Out of the big studio area there. Yeah. But as
Quality.
far as winning anything, like you're thinking about lotteries or anything like that,
Well, anything, yeah.
I can't remember. There's probably little prizes here and there at conferences and things for having correct answers, or, you know, all of these conferences you go to, it's kind of fun. They have these sort of raffles, and it's always fun. And sometimes you win something, but I actually can't remember which one of those. It was something way back at one of those conferences.
As long as it's not like one of those old village fates where you win a tin of beans or something. You know?
No, nothing quite like that.
Alas, you've just been put on death row. We don't know the details of what your crime was, but what is your choice of final meal?
Choice of final meal. Wow, that's a challenging one. Well, I think it would be my mainstay, which is brown rice, steamed vegetables, and some protein. Take your pick. I even enjoy tofu. Tofu prepared the right way is delicious. And I did spend a lot of time, by the way, in Japan teaching RV. So I gained a love of tofu over
Of
there.
tofu, yeah.
Since it's served alongside meat, since they don't have quite the resources to create the amount of protein that we have in more larger countries. So I would say something like that. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, my girlfriend has tofu, and I've never like plucked up the courage to try it yet, but maybe I will at some stage.
I have learned to enjoy it since my time in Japan. So
Yeah, cool. Two final questions here. When you leave this earth, what would people say about you?
what would people say? Well, I would hope something good.
Naturally, yeah.
I hope something positive. I would hope they say something like I've read in these reviews of my books. I am continually oppressed by the reviews, especially Dark Matter Monsters, but the other ones. And people said this is the first time I feel like I really understand some of these paranormal topics. It really helped me. So I would hope people will say that this person was extremely helpful in seeing reality in a new and productive way.
Excellent
And
stuff.
some of his songs were pretty darn good too. I mean, I enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
they were better than the books, weren't they? The songs. Yeah.
They can be, actually. Sometimes they are.
Yeah. They could literally resonate with people. Right, final one in the Koit zone. Favorite sweets or candy?
I have a soft tooth for whipped cream.
Can you do this?
No, not very often. But when I'm out at a restaurant and that's on the menu, it's very hard to resist anything with whipped cream. And I enjoyed visiting your country so many times. I was once offered triple cream. Do you know what that is? They actually asked me if I'd like cream with my whipped cream.
Cream on your cream, sir. Yes.
And the dish was some sort of cream-based cheesecake. So it was like triple cream. They said, would you like cream with your whipped cream? I thought they were joking. They weren't joking. It was clotted cream ice cream. That's what it was. It was clotted cream ice cream with whipped cream and cream.
And then pouring cream. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
This is illegal in the US. You are not allowed to have three cream things, let alone, the Heart Association would like declare it a felony for cholesterol. But I loved that clotted cream ice cream. I can still remember where it was. It was near the Westbury White Horse. We were out there, and there was a crop circle nearby, which we'd come to look at. And we went to near the Westbury White Horse. There was a little a pub, and they asked us if we would like cream with our whipped cream on top of the clotted cream. So I would say there you go.
Bang on. Clotted cream ice cream, by the way, is super lush. So fair play to you.
Wish I could get it here. Wish I could get it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you have to come back here more often then, won't you? Okay, that is the end of the Koit zone. For thank you for that. So two final questions in the interview. First, I always ask everyone, what else do you like to do in your downtime? Any activities or guilty pleasures?
I like walking a lot, for one thing. You never know what you might see out there. And of course, I think guitars have to win out. So,
yes.
and at the end of the day, I have some time, and sometimes, you spend an hour or two playing. It's really quite satisfying. Of course, it's very satisfying playing at open mics. And when I play music in open mics, I get into these ideas just a tiny little bit because people are not there to listen to you talk. But you can mention some of these and how they inspired songs.
Yeah. I by the way, I'm with you on songs. I do a lot of music work myself. And I think when you're in that song mindset, you can be in there for hours and get lost in it.
And it's a wonderful, entertaining thing that's totally free. And I always think about Rick Wakeman. In our country, Rick Wakeman is known as this fantastic keyboardist player who played with Yes and other bands time to time and Straubs and things like this. And then in your country, he's known as a talk show guest, a talk show host, Grumpy Old Men.
Yes. Yes. Fair play.
So you can do multiple things and be good at all of it.
That is very much true. And the final question I'm going to ask you then, what are you currently working on?
Oh, I am working really hard for a revised version of Black Swan Ghost. I have more stories. I published this in 2017 before the New York Times article came out. So it really needs to be revised. Where have we been since the article came out? And then I have new witnesses. A witness who handled crash materials, a type engineer who told me what it was like and how the materials work to the best of his ability to understand, even though he said it was 1,000 years ahead of us. A missile security guard that saw a UFO take off near a missile silo in Velva, South Dakota.
Magical.
And that story about Vinny, about the wrestling coach who saw the black triangle over Mamaroneck High School, and jets came out and chased it, and he said it took off like the Starship Enterprise at warp speed.
Oh, lush.
And I only found out about it a couple of years ago, but that should be in the book too. That's the ultimate Black Swan. Why is it Black Swan Ghost? Because people don't talk about this. They've had the experience, and they could wait like Vinny, like decades before they tell anyone else. So.
And we need to hear these stories. So yeah, when's this book expected to be out, the updated version?
I'm happy to say it's already been accepted by Library of Congress.
Oh, lovely.
Library of Congress in our country is very open to local history and stories and people's experiences. They don't just want the mega hits. They want the history of the U.S. And these stories happened here, many of them. So I already have the control number for Library of Congress. So I'm hoping in another couple of weeks it'll be done. It's just a lot of it is you might be like typesetting and working with Amazon and getting it, into their system.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not just writing it, but it's formatting it and making sure it looks good at the end. And you've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's and stuff. But yeah, in a couple of weeks. My other project right now, I've always wanted to start a group remote viewing experience for beginners. So I'm starting that this Sunday, and I'll be putting that up either today or tomorrow on my site. Just something people can do very inexpensively once a month with a forum and places for Q&A where people can just try it out who've always been curious. And we can meet once a month and just do some practice.
That is super, super ace. Listen, Simeon, thank you ever so much for your time today. I really appreciate that. What I would suggest for everyone is please check out Simeon's links in the description. I'll put loads of links there to all his stuff. Go and check it out. It's well worth your time. But thank you to you, Simeon. Much appreciated. Goodbye, everyone. To watch other KoitCast episodes, please click the image top left. To subscribe to my channel, please click the image top right. Please like and share to help KoitCast grow, and most importantly of all, please click the notification bell so you never miss an upload.